Hi everyone.
Hey, welcome to Alumni Angles, second episodes. I am Ama Badu.
And I am Deanna Lynn Cook.
I am very excited to be here today.
We are, very much.
It is, of course, Black History Month, so we are very much conscious of that. Should we do introductions first?
Yes, do you want to go first?
Yes. Okay,
Absolutely.
Sorry. I'm Ama Badu. I'm Ama Badu. I am now an assistant editor at
Congratulations.
Favour Children's. This is new. And the Fab website editor. I'm also the voice of Shudu, who's the world's first virtual model. Yes.
Fantastic. Look at you. I am Deanna Lynn Cook. I am founder of the History Hotline podcast, and I am a project officer at Wesley's Chapel and Legion Mission at the moment, and just a keen historian trying to make my way through the history ranks to bring and educate people on Black history.
Love to see it. Doing all of the things. We absolutely love it.
We're trying.
Yes. Okay, so we have a lot to talk about today. A lot to talk about in terms of representation, a lot to talk about in the industries we work in.
Yeah.
But let's start off by talking about pride and proud, things that we're proud of, especially when it comes to our blackness.
Yeah.
I think we're in a very exciting moment right now where there is just so much more visibility to the talent and the creativity that's always been there. There's so much more noise about it, and that makes me so proud.
Definitely.
It makes me so proud to see us wearing our hair how we want to, you know, not conforming to standards or releasing the standards that have been holding us in a chokehold for so long.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be a Black woman. Like I know, I definitely am. I think from growing up in this country and seeing the changes societally that seem to have taken a really long time, and looking at a longer history of it all, it feels like it's taking generations, but I feel like there is change and there are some steps, and you know, being a Black woman working in the field of history, there's really not many of us. I mean, you know, you probably haven't had a Black lecturer. I certainly haven't, and I've been studying for so long in this country. So, yeah, I'm proud to be where I am right now, but still conscious of the fact that there is still quite a journey to go.
Yes.
And we might not get there in our lifetime, but, you know, I hope one day.
One day. I think all we can do is be what we want those coming after us to see.
Absolutely.
You know, I think, and this is going to lead very nicely into representation, because you know, you need to see what you want to become.
I think so.
You know, I work in publishing, and it's a very white space, and I didn't really realize publishing and publishing roles and jobs until a couple of years ago. Really, there isn't enough out there to say this is what you can do, this is where you can go. And I think also when you think about our communities, a lot of the time we are sort of angled and pushed towards safer career options. Teacher. I was supposed to be a teacher.
Same. I come from a long line of teachers.
I don't come from a long line of teachers. I was just supposed to be one.
I think doing English as well at university,
yes,
a lot of people were on that career trajectory.
Yes.
And even now, like I remember the year after we finished our degree, everybody was kind of finishing their PGCEs
yes.
and going into teaching. And I never wanted to be a teacher, but doing English and history, a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, so you're going to teach? And I'm like, I mean, technically, yes, one day I would like to go into academia, but I guess it's a different kind of teaching, and it's more about the research then. But as you said, you know, I've never had a Black lecturer. I've been in institutions where there's been one, and they have literally just been the one. But, you know, how do I, as a young girl, and I literally remember I was just about to do my UCAS form, and they'd made us start early, so we were in lower sixth, and I was thinking, okay, I want to be a lecturer. I loved transatlantic slavery, I loved African American history. I'm like, I'm going to be a history lecturer. And then I was like, oh, let me kind of like find some that are kind of doing that now. And like all the Black people were in America, and I was like, well, I'm not going to America, I'm going to stay here, so who's here? And it was bleak. And then I found the statistics, and I think at the time there was like 35 Black lecturers, like Black women lecturers, and within history there were no Black women professors. The first one got her professorship in 2016, so while I was doing my degree. And that's a lady called Olivetta Telle, and she's at, I think, Bristol University. But that's not enough.
At all.
That's not okay.
At all.
How are we going to teach our histories? How are we going to learn about our histories if we don't have a seat at the table when these histories are being written? And I don't think people sometimes understand how like important the role of a historian is in terms of public discourse on history. You know, all these statues, they come from the work that happens in these ivory towers, and if we aren't in those rooms and those spaces, then it's going to be very whitewashed for a very long time.
Absolutely. And I think also then the way it's taught all the way down through education is also that way, you know. I think, and I also think you bring a sense of heart to what you do, right? You bring a sense of soul, and how do you do that if you don't have that connection? How do you infuse students if you yourself aren't infused by it?
Exactly.
I was talking to someone earlier this week, and I was talking about how much I enjoyed the modules I got to do at Queen Mary, especially in second and third year, because they did focus on Black stories, you know. There was post-colonial study, there was, you know, writing South Africa, there was James Baldwin. And I remember sitting in a lot of those seminars and spaces and thinking, why do I have to go to uni to be able to have access to these books? Yeah. Right, why do I have to... How many of us don't even get to this stage before we realise all this stuff about our history?
Honestly. It's that realisation where I had so many friends that did A-level English history, and they were like, why would I ever do that at university? I don't want to do Shakespeare for another year. I don't want to do Henry VIII anymore. And I got to university and I was like, telling like friends, you know, what I'm studying, and they're like, what? Yeah. Like, why couldn't we have done this at school? And we could have done that at school. We could have. But, you know, the exam boards, the curriculum, it's not set up for us to be able to do that. And it's a shame that you have to... I knew for me in history anyway, I would have to grin and bear a lot of history that I hated. And I will honestly say, until I got to like my master's, that's when I started doing history that I was actually, you know, I could truly say this is me, and that was Black British history. Fortunately, the English department had Black writing in Britain as a second year module, and that was what introduced me to Black history, Black British history anyway, because before that it was all American. I kind of got tired of it, because even, you know, when we think about Black History Month, it was every year, let's chart out Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and there are a plethora of Black British heroes and heroines, and they're kind of just sitting there under the carpet ready to be discovered by society. And I'm happy that's kind of happening, but...
Because in a way, I think it's almost lazy, right? It's lazy that...
So lazy.
I remember...
Story time.
Story time! Sixth form, I was head girl. Yeah. And for the 2 years, me and my friends have been trying to put on events in the school and in the neighbourhood, in the borough, for Black History Month. And we mobilised... I'm amazed at what we did. We mobilised, you know, groups who were taking care of food, groups who were taking care of, you know, art and culture. We did so much. We had lesson plans. Wow. We went in. We went in! And our school let us down. For 2 years, they let us down. And... in A2, I was head girl, and I wrote a very strongly worded email to my head teacher saying this isn't acceptable, this is not acceptable, you need to do better, we need to do better. And actually, when I think about it now, like, go little Amma for doing it, but also, why was little Amma doing it? Why was there no one in the positions who should have been in the positions doing it? Absolutely. Why are we doing and having the very same conversations a lot of the time? And I think, you know, last year in all of our industries had been a big shift. There's been this... we've just discovered racism is real kind of thing.
And we've discovered Black people.
And we've discovered... But we've been talking about it and screaming about it for so long.
Yeah. No, I understand. And I think with schools as well, thinking about your story there, when I was in school, I remember in sixth form, I was one of the prefects. And so that kind of... most of us were Black or Asian. My school was very Asian, so it was quite a diverse place in that sense. But we went to the teacher, and all the teachers were pretty much white. And we said, "Oh, are you going to do anything for Black History Month? Like, we'd love to help if you're doing anything. You know, let us know." And she was like, "Well, you know what, girls, if you want to, you can just do it, yeah." And I was like,
"This is a..."
And we wrote like a whole assembly. Yeah. And I remember we did the assembly, and then someone after the assembly was like, "Oh, I'm sure like it was really good, but like your mics weren't working." Like they didn't hear any of it, and I don't think it was deliberate or anything, but it was just extra like insults, like a twist of the knife. We were up all night like emailing each other like, "Oh, has everybody got their parts ready? We're doing this assembly," and then no one even heard it, and it was just like, oh, that's how much you care. And we weren't even given a second date, like, oh, could we do it again maybe with working tech? And it was like, no.
That is heart-wrenching.
I know.
That is heart-wrenching. Our school did something similar as well. We had planned to do an assembly for every single year group as we went along. They didn't give us that. They ended up giving us sixth form assembly, and even then we had like 10 minutes. We had to condensing all of Black history.
And you know when you want to get everyone in, you're like, it's my one chance. I got to tell them about everybody. And even then, I think the assembly we planned was very American centric, because that's all we knew. I didn't know about the Mangrove 9. I didn't know any of that stuff then. as a 17-year-old. But yeah, here we are. I mean, I think it's better now. I've been invited, like, through the History Hotline, the podcast I have, to speak in schools. And I went to a school in Greenwich before, and one of the girls was like, oh, like, it's so nice to see you. Like you're so cool. And I was like, thank you. But, like, the teacher after was like, yeah, they need to see this because we don't have black teachers here, especially not teaching history. So they need to see, like, someone like you. And it kind of brings us back to the point on representation. Like, you know, you don't kind of know what you can do if you can't see it.
That's it.
And it's not every day turn to America for role models, because they should, and they do exist here. We just need to see that more.
Absolutely. And I sort of come at representation through books, you know. I worked in education for a little bit as well. And I spent a lot of time trying to convince little girls, especially that looks like me, and boys, to read. And in my final year, there's someone that comes to mind. She was Ghanaian, so like myself, she was maybe 14, 15, had some like educational difficulties as well. And she's like, Miss, I don't read. I'm like, what do you mean you do not read? I don't like reading, books are boring. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a little reading list. Just pick up one of these books and see how you find it. The week later, oh, this book is so good. What's next? What can I read next? And I really think about this. I think about this a lot. At what point do children see books and read of characters that look like them and reflects their reality? What was the first book that made you feel seen?
Noughts and Crosses.
Oh.
Yeah, I read that early.
How old were you?
I was like 11,
okay.
10 or 11.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about, what I'd read as a child. And I look at children's books now and I'm like, how cool. Like, I remember when Hair Love came out and the little short on YouTube. And like, my dad did my hair every day for school, the whole of primary school. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is like beautiful. But yeah, it was Noughts and Crosses. And that wasn't anything school gave me. That was what my mom gave me. And then I was like, oh, I want more of this. And, you know, I read the series and then started reading. I got into historical fiction really early. I just loved it. And I read a lot of slave narratives. I don't know why.
Way too early.
Right?
Way too early.
There's no, like, the life and times of Harriet Jacobs as like a 12-year-old is not necessary.
And you know, I do know why this happens. So for me, my family, we all read. And my mum, or mother figure, my chosen mother, she would read these books. She would read, you know, slave narratives, and she was American Jamaican, so she would read a lot of American literature, Black American literature, pass it on to her older son, so my big brother. He would then pass it on to me, and we'd have like a little group discussion and like a little book club. And so it did mean I was exposed to things a lot earlier. And then she started reading Chimamanda, and I know there's a lot of conversation about her right now. But I read Purple Hibiscus. And like, I'm Ghanaian, so I'm not Nigerian, but there was so much in the culture that I could, and so much that she was describing that I could really resonate with. I actually used it for my dissertation, so I was very interested in, you know, representation of father figures, and especially in West African literature. But there wasn't that was a moment for me, and I know that Mum and Big Brother didn't feel it in the same way because it wasn't quite the same experience.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there's something there. You know, I think it's so important. Whenever I'm reading the books that we get on submission, I'm like, who's written this, and what's the main character like, and when we create a cover, what does the cover look like? Who are we seeing on the cover? Because that's so important to be able to go into a bookshop like you can now and see so many faces and so many just tones and range. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And it is a definite shift. I mean, you probably can feel it more because you're in the industry and in publishing. But even me as just like a kind of casual reader, I don't really read fiction. No, I don't read fiction. I read non-fiction a lot. So, you know, just seeing it in bookshops or when you're browsing or on like Amazon or on a bookshop website, it does feel like there has been a change. But then sometimes I don't know if I, as a kind of Black historian in those spaces, I'm just tapped into a different matrix of everything Black, because I've realised, I think I've curated my social media feeds, my YouTube, to just be a reflection of myself. And I think someone kind of said, like, even politically, we should be taking in a bigger range of thoughts, but sometimes you just don't want to hear it. I think we've grown up with no representation in the media, Hollywood, TV, to now be able to kind of curate my own social media spaces to represent me so well. I've kind of like run at that and jumped at that. So sometimes I don't know if like the world is not as black as I think it is because of...
No, I think this is a really powerful point, because actually, you know, I'm very conscious of how I use social media. So like you, it's about curating a space. And I think those spaces are sacred, right?
Yeah.
Because you're spending, we all spend a little bit too much time on our phones and on social media. And I think it's so important that when we're there, we feel seen and represented.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot of, I've been thinking a lot about beauty standards at the moment, coming out of lockdown, and I've put on a bit of weight, and it's fine because you know what, I love it. But absolutely. I'm conscious of how I feel when I see certain things, and that the Western standard of beauty looks a certain way.
Yep.
I'm also very conscious, you know, I'm going on a trip to Ghana, hopefully in January, and I think every time I'm on the African continent, how I feel about my being, my body, my curves is so different, because everyone around me looks like me, you know, and there's so much variation in that. And so then to create those spaces, to curate those spaces on a social media, I think is so powerful. There's so much noise and there's so much ugliness and there's so much mess and so much shouting on social media, that actually protecting your energy and your peace is so important that way as well.
As you said, I spend a ridiculous amount of time on there, and I guess it's not reflected in the outside world, but you don't necessarily have to partake so much in a weird way, because
we live in the outside world, we go into work in the outside world, you know. Absolutely,
definitely. And I think as well, your point about, you know, being in Ghana, seeing all these kind of like people that look like you, I always, like, when I was a child, literally until the pandemic, I went to Jamaica every single summer to stay with my grandparents, and very fortunate for that. But like, everyone is just black, and not even just, you know, everyone's a different shade of black, because there's the history of, you know, indentured labourers, you know, there's English people there, everybody's mixed in, and it's all working somewhat well. But I was thinking about the Channel 4's Black to Front Day, and when I was watching that, I was like, this is what it feels like watching TV in Jamaica. It's all the newsreaders are black, all the adverts are about black people, because everybody there is black, so it would be silly for it not to be like that. And I don't think it's too much to ask, not necessarily have a Black to Front Day every day. That would be silly, you know, but to see ourselves more. And I feel like adverts have done it a lot, but then it feels to me very sinister. It's like, you're consumers, so we're going to pander to you to make you buy, but we don't actually want to give you like a job in an advert. It's a one-off payment, right? Surely it's not like an ongoing series or something like that. So you're gonna get your money, and everybody else is gonna spend because we've put in these black people, and like, that doesn't make me feel good.
No, I'm also very conscious of, I want to say tokenism, but it's more than just tokenism. I'm very conscious of the things that are being done to sort of appease us.
Good word.
Yes. And then, so it's like, I think I often question how much things have changed. And I think it's easier to create an illusion of change than real change. And I think there are things easily done, you know, the visibility side of things. If things are visible, things are changing so much. Okay, so publishing, for example, we have loads of books, right? Loads of books, and loads of books now by diverse writers featuring diverse characters. Fantastic. But what does it look like inside the publishing houses?
And at the top of
them. And at the top. What does it look like inside the spaces that are making these decisions? I think, yes, we've got one step. It's big. I'm not taking that for granted, but I'm conscious of the fact that it's easier to believe that things have changed.
Absolutely.
When they haven't as much as they should have.
I agree, definitely.
Okay, so tokenism, I think, is something that's quite interesting, because I'm conscious of the fact that there's a lot of, it's easy to show that things are changing without actually changing it. And that does worry me. Okay. I have something to say.
Let's go.
I'm going to say it on my chest and my shoulders. Okay. So far, my career in publishing has gone quite quickly. And I'm thrilled at that. I have a team that really supports me and really does believe in my vision. Not because I'm black, but because I do the work.
You're talented.
And thank you. But what's really hard is when we're in this system where tokens and, you know, people are put into places because it shows, we're diverse. It really is quite insidious in what it does to your mind, and how it makes you question and second guess yourself constantly. And it's hard to see things in an authentic way and in a balanced way. And if you don't have team members who are aware of that, and community around you who are aware of that, and who sort of build you up and tell you how amazing you are, it can really do a lot to your confidence to feel that you're in a position, because, you know, in a lot of creative spaces, people go in through something like creative access and they're doing an amazing job. We need it. We need affirmative action right now. But I think that does something very insidious.
Definitely.
To your confidence.
Yeah, and I guess it links in with like imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And like not really believing in yourself. And I think as Black women especially, and women as well, you kind of feel it a little bit more like, was I just hired to tick a box? And I've got the same experience in a really affirming workspace where I'm kind of the only person that does the subject history of Black history. Like my colleague is a curator in like 17th century like buildings and like churches and things like that, so I'm literally the only one, and I think if I wasn't, I would be like, oh, should I even be here? But they're literally like to me like, whatever you think, you're the subject expert, and I'm like, oh yeah, I am. Like, that's me. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm young as well, like, you know, it's kind of like first proper jobs outside of like uni, graduating, but I don't know if this is something that will play on my mind into later years, and I hope not, because as you build experience, you should be more assured and more confident in yourself. But I guess the world isn't set up for that. And it's something you hear about in so many different professions and with so many different groups of people too. But and unless you're in a affirming workspace, it's not very helpful, and it can be detrimental.
This is it. I think it's so important that you're in a safe space. You know, I've worked in places where I have not felt so safe, and have not been so affirming. And I think that really does do something to you. And I think it made me realise, okay, so I came into publishing and everyone's like, oh, it's such a slow process. You stay in the same place for so long and it takes so long to, you know, get that promotion. It takes so long to get a pay rise. It takes so long to do all these things. And I know that's a lot of people's truths. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be that way. No. You know, and that's the really refreshing thing, and that's the really exciting thing, that it actually, if you have people in your team who champion you, who see a vision for you, even if you can't see it yourself, who really can help you, direct you, give you that mentorship, there is no reason why we don't succeed. There's no reason why we can't succeed.
Absolutely.
But if you're in a hostile working environment and you're constantly being othered for your Blackness or anything, it's
Yeah, definitely. When you're talking about like being in a hostile work environment, I don't know why my mind went straight to those footballers. And I know that was like a huge topic of like, you know, these boys they've gone up, they've done their job, it hasn't gone to plan. England,
and they're babies, they're boppers, they're so young.
I know. And I was working in a school at the time with year 10 and 11s, and to me, like, Saka is literally a year 10. Because I was like, I'm going to teach you on Monday morning. Like, they were so like small and, you know, they were doing their job. They did it. It didn't go to plan. England got further than they've got in decades. I don't know the history of it all. But the fact that then they went on to be subjected to racial abuse, and I don't understand how they keep playing, personally. I just, if I went to work and I was racially abused, I wouldn't go back. And I understand, you know, there's like economics to deal with and like how everything's set up. I'm sure it's a bigger issue than what we can see from the outside. But I think sometimes it begs the question of like, who can stop this, like, and why isn't it stopping? Because if it's, you know, they've had give racism the red card, that's been in for decades, kick racism out of football, all these like schemes, and I feel like the government are really good with coming up with these catchy slogans to champion and target racism, but they're not doing anything. Like, when are we actually going to see concrete change? And my biggest issue is coming off that Sewell report, where they were like, Britain's no longer institutionally racist.
I was just going to say this, because how can you cure something that you don't even believe you
have?
Right,
this is my point. So it doesn't exist, so we don't need to find a cure for it. But most of the racism we face, bar that footballing, you know, time, is systemic. It's about, you know, being in institutions and there being doors that you can't even see that are closed in front of you, or in front of, you know, other minorities or women or whoever. And I just don't know how we're going to see changes in this Britain when they like can't acknowledge systemic racism. You know, you've got a Home Office that are deporting people at a stupid rate, and now calling people back because we need workers. What does that say about your relationship with Black and brown people? It's
just so insidious and it's so seedy. And I think when we're having conversations about racism, it's very much surface level. This is what worries me. The conversations we're having it doesn't go deep enough. You know, and I think what needs acknowledging is how we've gotten to this point. All the steps that have happened to get us to this point before we can even begin to think about how we move forward from that.
Absolutely.
It really goes at every single level, you know, like working with kids, you just see it from when they're just learning to read and write. And that's heart-wrenching, because they deserve all of the opportunities.
Definitely. And I guess my thing as well, you know, being in history spaces is if this history is not taught, we cannot dig it out and figure out what went wrong. We know what went wrong if you know the history. But thinking about, as you said, like, you know, little children going to school. If you were in that Windrush generation, how many, you know, years ago, and you were coming into a school, you were assumed as you walked into that school, whatever you could do, whatever you couldn't do, what your parents did, what they didn't do, you were not expected to do well. You were said to have a lower IQ, and you were literally not expected to succeed. So you went into an educationally subnormal school, and that there was a documentary on it recently. I think the BBC did one, and it was kind of exposing that scandal. But it was exposed in the black community at the time. But black people then, from the Caribbean mostly, they couldn't do anything about it. You know, if you don't have the financial resources to be there or picking your child up from school, you've got to be at work. You know, your child's making their own way. They're not corresponding with the teachers and things like that. How can you kind of make a change? And I think something in a policy like that has trickled down, because if your parents have seen education in the worst way and been tarnished by it, how are they going to pass those values on to you? Your relationship with education is going to be poor. And it's just so heartbreaking that we aren't learning these lessons from the past. Every time we think about, and I hate to compare like traumas and struggles, but there's certain histories, and the Holocaust comes to mind, and it's like, never forget, you know, war, that's the slogan for it, lest we forget. But we forget all the racial injustices that happened to like black and brown people that Britain did through colonization and imperialism.
Because the more you talk about it, the more you have to acknowledge how wrong it is, right? It's very much easy to focus on someone else's wrongdoing and focus on the lessons we can learn from external, and, you know, judge and police what other countries have done in their history, but to actually look at your own when you don't even want to acknowledge or admit it, you don't even think it's a problem. You know,
absolutely. And it is a huge problem.
It is.
I think it is just really important that we properly interrogate history, and it really scares me that even though we've got all these great statues coming up and certain statues coming down, the conversation is really, when we think about history, just focused on what, you know, all these woke people are doing to the retelling of British history, and it's very dishonest and inaccurate. And unfortunately, it has a trickle-down effect, because, you know, if you're in a classroom and you're relying on your school to teach you a broad range of histories, you're not going to get that. And thinking back to when I was working in a school, and I mostly worked with black boys, it was an inner city school, and there were just, lots of black children in that school. And I was teaching English, so on the poetry anthology, there's one poem by a black man, John Agard, checking out my history, and you get to learn about all these historical figures, Nanny of the Maroons, Mary Seacole, Shaka the Zulu, and they got so excited. Like, it was the one lesson where I had engagement. I was like, why can't you be like this all the time? And it was a silly question for me to ask. They were like, well, we normally do Wilfred Owen and Save Free to Soon, and we don't care about World War One. So, unfortunately, you know, if that is their experience of English, which is a core subject up until GCSE, how are they then going to get the qualifications needed to get into these careers that, you know, could see them prospering? Not to say everybody needs to be these high-flying careers, but I feel for black boys, their only role models are, and not only because obviously I'm not, you know, people have their own families and they see role models in their own spaces, but for the most part, on a pedestal in this country are the footballers and the rappers. And not to say they're bad role models, but there are so many other options for them.
You need more.
And if you can't see that in your community, and then you can't see that outside in TV, how are you going to know to step into those roles or what to do? And thankfully, and I have a few friends that work in finance and, you know, industries like that, there seem to be more like initiatives to kind of expose boys to that at a younger age so that they can kind of work towards it, because you need to know that at like GCSE to know what subjects to take at A-level to then go on to be a lawyer or a doctor or work in finance. Or not to say, again, everyone needs to do a high-flying career like that, but at least have them think and understand that that's an option and that's something they can attain to and be achieving.
There's six. If you know what's out there, then you have more choice. I think everyone should have choice.
Exactly, because for the most part, we're all capable.
Yes.
You know, given a better chance at the start when you're a little kid in school, or you know, given the better opportunities in after school clubs and provisions like that, we all are capable of. And yes, we're all going to be drawn to certain things, but there's no reason why I think the doors should be closed so early. It's like you walk into school on the first day and it's already like 70% of the careers you can't do. That can't be right. Especially in a country like Britain that's meant to be, you know, freedom for everyone.
Absolutely.
And everybody's
Streets
equal.
paved with
Well, land of milk and honey
yes,
and all that.
Yes. So yes, we've talked about role models. Who were some of your role models? Who do you look up to? Who do you aspire to?
Well, when I was little, if you asked me that, I would say Beyonce.
I love it.
But thinking more historically, just because
Yes.
I guess that's the people I'm kind of surrounded with and in my thoughts all the time. Right now, I've been looking at the life of Claudia Jones a lot, and she was actually exiled from America, and she's from Trinidad, moved to America with a family as a little kid, got into like the communist movement in America, and there was the Red Scare and like all that, and she got exiled, and Trinidad were kind of like, no, we don't want her, she'll kick up a fuss. She comes to Britain, starts the first like black owned publication, the West Indian Gazette. She's the reason for Carnival, for the first one, which was like done in St Pancras Hall. And like the BBC filmed it and everything. Was like a parade. They had beauty pageants to kind of chant to to like think about different standards of beauty, and like obviously what was on show in Britain at that time was not black women, so she had a beauty pageant as well. And she also like did so much work for someone that was just kind of thrown into England, but for the black community in England she did so much, and she was quite sick for the majority of her life, but you know, continued on anyway, and she unfortunately passed away quite young, considering like how much she was kind of on a trajectory to achieve. But yeah, she's one of my inspirations at the moment, as well as Beyonce, for different reasons, because you know, she don't try and be more like Beyonce. But I think taking heroes from history, and for me as well, all of my heroes, maybe if you'd asked me this as a sixth former, would have been American, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that history, as I've said, it's just so in the fore. And black British history, like I don't think most people can name someone, a woman, a black woman of political historical influence from Britain. They can't. I put polls out on my podcast Instagram all the time, and I get like crickets.
Oh my gosh.
Because we haven't been taught about them. When we do think about movements of black liberation, we think about the men. The men. What about you?
Okay, so I'm going to cheat. Don't be mad.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the women in my chosen family, specifically the black women in my chosen family. They come from all across the diaspora. I'm actually very lucky to have the people I have in my life.
That's good.
But the reason I speak on them is because, you know, I think there's certain stereotypes for black women, right? We're supposed to fit into certain boxes, and we're supposed to think in certain ways. And they defied that time and again. And by fire and by force, they made sure I defied that.
That's good.
They challenged me to see more for myself, especially at a time where I couldn't see more for myself. I think a lot about my big sister, who said, you know, don't let them eat your soul. Don't let them destroy your heart. Don't let them sort of limit how much you can dream. I think about Mama C, who is just life. She really is just life. She changes things so often. She will decide today she wants to do something, and she'll go out and do it. And will not hear any nonsense about it. And I think these women have just had such a big impact in me, in guiding me in my career, in getting me to read and getting me to find and use my voice. Definitely. I think for a very long time I wasn't aware of the power that my voice had, and so having these women around me to remind me of that and to actively demonstrate that, I think has had such an impact on me. And I'm aware that not everyone has that, you know. I'm aware that, you know, a lot of the kids I worked with didn't have that, and so I tried to emanate that, and I tried to be that for them, because I think we all need that. We need to be able to see what we want to become.
And I was just going to say, I think the importance of family, when we think about, you know, representation, we can all turn to that for the most part, and not to assume everybody has that, but as you said, you can look within your own community. It doesn't have to be, and I think I've learned this through force, maybe, that I can't rely on you know, the TV production companies to put on what I need to see, but we can turn inwards and look at our moms, our nans, our aunties, and fathers as well, uncles, and the role models we have around us to kind of strive, and whether that's they're in a job we want or it's their character, as you've mentioned, which is sometimes more important, because if you have the resilience, you can go and do anything, even if you haven't seen it necessarily, but if you truly believe that, you know, you've seen those traits in someone else and they've achieved something similar, it can be done. So definitely the importance of family, especially in the pandemic. I think being around them so much, you're going to pick up the best and worst, but definitely an important time.
Absolutely.
So what do you feel hopeful for then? Let's think moving forwards. We're going to come out of this Black History Month, and what are you thinking?
I think a lot about the generation that's come before us and us now, and I think in certain spaces, you know, I think a lot about the message I was taught as a child, having to work twice as hard to
Yeah.
get half as much, sort of leaning in towards respectability politics and things like that. What makes me hopeful is seeing, you know, a generation of black men, women who are just unapologetically and authentically themselves.
Yeah.
Be that in how they dress, be that in their hair, be that in how they speak. And to me, that is so exciting. It's so exciting to just be.
Yeah, just to exist.
Just to exist. And to exist in a way that feels natural. You know, I was writing an email the other day about a book and I was like, we have to take this book on and da-da-da-da. Like, just being able to express myself as myself and not having to filter that, not having to compartmentalize that.
Yeah.
Because I just think the world needs to see how amazing we are.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Yes. For sure.
What makes you feel hopeful?
Well, I think I will be completely satisfied, I don't know if it will happen, in a point in life where I don't have to walk into any space and think about the fact that I'm black.
Mm-hmm.
I can just be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, I remember when I was little and I decided that I was going to start wearing makeup.
Yeah.
My mum doesn't wear any makeup, and she was like, I don't think you need to wear makeup, so she just wasn't really supporting the mission. So I went to Boots, and at the time Zoella was like the biggest YouTuber, and she used to use like some whatever foundation she used. I was like, I'll just get that one. So I went and I was like looking at the shades and I was like, oh, this one looks about me. It was like the darkest one, and I put it on when I got home and my mum burst out laughing because I literally looked like a ghost.
Oh my gosh.
That shit, it was but it was the darkest one.
Yeah,
and obviously
yeah.
there weren't any, or I didn't at the time know any of the black YouTubers.
Yeah.
Little did I know Jackie Aina existed,
there.
Shameless Maya,
She's there.
Patricia Bright was
She's
out
there.
but I didn't know, and I found them later.
Yeah.
And even then though, foundation brands that were drugstore anyway that I could afford as a teenager, like, didn't really exist. So now, like, seeing stuff like Fenty, where I can go to the Fenty counter, I don't think about I'm black. I'm just like, that's my shade.
Yes.
They've got my undertones.
Yes.
Pat McGrath
Yes.
doing similar
Oh my
work.
gosh.
And I just feel like, yes, that's a superficial thing in beauty. But,
is it? I don't think it's superficial.
right? I mean, I could live without foundation, let's say.
Yeah.
But it just feels so much nicer
Absolutely.
to know you're catered for, not just to be, as we've said, the face of an advert where you can't even buy their products anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hopeful for stuff like that. I'm hopeful for big changes though, like systemic shifts, like flipping tables, because we've done the little tiptoeing around topics for too long, and I think it's time for some big changes. I just hope that, you know, we won't have to lose much to get something, because it sometimes feels like we do. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling about the future.
It's exciting, right?
Yeah, it is. Some days I'm excited, some days I'm weary,
but
that's life, I guess.
it is.
Definitely.
It's an interesting moment, I think, in human history. I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot of conversations happening. There's a lot of conversations about nuance and intersectionality, and I think all of these things are heading somewhere. We hope.
Conversations plus action,
because we've been doing a lot of talking.
We've been talking
for too long.
But yeah, definitely conversations and action and change.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure
speaking
to you today.
Oh my goodness, it's been amazing.
I know, reunited.
Yes,
it feels so good.
But
yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast.